The Wallabies stunned the Springboks in Johannesburg to complete a 38-22 victory, whilst the All Blacks proved too strong for Argentina in Cordoba. Welcome back to the Rock and Roll Show. It's episode 6. It's a one-man show today with myself, Adam Gaston, and we're going to run through everything for the Rugby Championship last weekend in round 1 and preview this weekend's fixtures in round 2. So we'll start with something that I would probably describe as one of the biggest shocks in international rugby this year in terms of results. The Wallabies beating the Springboks 38-22. I mean, what an absolute huge victory for the Wallabies. Coming off the back of that Lions series, putting out a good performance in that second test, not quite getting it done, and then that third test, getting that huge victory to prevent the whitewash. We sort of came into this game, and despite those two performances and that latter victory, we didn't think that the Wallabies, we didn't really fancy them in this game. They definitely came in as underdogs with the double world champions who just lay waste to Georgia and Italy in the summer tour. But I mean, what a performance that was. I mean, we can start off at the start of the game. 19 minutes in, the Springboks are just peppering Australia with just heavy phase play, just fast, powerful, and then getting those 3 tries to put themselves 22-0 into the lead. And from there, you sort of think, how much could this be? This could be a real cricket score. And I think it was really impressive in that opening 18 minutes. Some would say, I think you could say at least that opening 18 minutes was exactly what Rassie Erasmus was looking for from the Springbok side. Obviously, they've revamped the way they're playing. They're playing a lot more sort of as quickly as possible from the ruck, whether the nine's there or not. They're just playing fast phases. They're looking to batter you up front with that physicality in that power game, and then looking to spread it wide. It's a lot more of an expansive game. I thought they really mastered it in those early stages, and indeed throughout the game to a much extent. In the latter stages of the game, particularly in the second half, they sort of wasn't coming off the same way, and in that latter part of the first half as well. But they started so fast in this game. I think 90 seconds in, Curtly Arons scores, and then you're just thinking, this could be a long day for the Wallabies here. But they worked themselves back into this game. I think the 9 and 10 combo of Nick White, obviously not retiring and coming back in for this Rugby Championship, which raised a few eyebrows, I think, after him renouncing his retirement. But I mean, could you really argue with that performance and him coming back from retirement? And then James O'Connor coming back in from the fold after several years out of the international stage. And that 9 and 10 combo for the Wallabies, I mean, that was absolutely huge in getting them back into the game. I think the kicking game really sort of solidified their territory in the sort of the second half of that first half. They started putting it through the phases, and I think the key part of it was that sort of high bomb kicking game, really just like putting it up in the air, using the athletes that they had with Jorgensen, with Peach, with Swally and Ikatai, and sort of putting pressure on that Springboks back 3. And I think that really got them a lot of territory back in the game. Of course, they scored on 28 minutes after sort of sustained sort of territory and possession. James O'Connor with a superb offload out to Len Ikatai, who then puts Dylan Peach in the corner, and then that sort of puts them back in the game, or it certainly puts them sort of back in the fold, or certainly gives them a glimmer of hope, but it was only a glimmer at that stage. I think James O'Connor, just to speak roughly on him, absolutely fantastic in this game, and coming back, obviously a shock to be included in the squad for the Lions, and then now a shock to be starting. But moving back to the game, you sort of seen that towards the end of the half, where they sort of consolidating a bit of possession. The Springboks did come at them again with that sort of that harem scarum style that they had in the opening 20 minutes, but it just wasn't coming off in the same way. Come out fast in the second half. The Wallabies sort of had to start fast. They had to try and get a score on the board, and that's exactly what they did in the 42nd minutes with Harry Wilson, after a couple of huge impacts from Angus Bell, who made a huge carry and then sort of followed up with a lovely sort of disguised pass to put his captain through the hole and sort of over the line, and that was huge. That got them back within 10 points and really sort of stabilised their confidence. And Springboks, just from then on, it sort of felt like a wee bit rattled. They were getting into the positions. They were continuing that sort of that fast pace that we were doing in the first half, but just the accuracy wasn't there. Whether it was one thing, whether it was a knock on, whether it was a piece of intervention from Fraser McWright at the breakdown, who had so many turnovers in that half, in the second half, and then also the line out wasn't really functioning in the same way with Nick Frost. Again, you know what he was like in the Lions series, with just being an absolute huge disruptor of the opposition's line-out. Well, he was doing the same thing in Johannesburg, and I think that was huge just to stop the momentum of the the Springboks rather, and they just managed to just keep staying in the game despite the amount of pressure that was coming on them. They just kept staying in the game. It was a really gritty performance in that second half, and then you look at some of the tries that they scored in that second half. A lot of their dangerous play, obviously they kept up with that sort of high bomb kicking game, and they sort of found a lot of nice space in the backfield, and it kept breaking down for the Springboks, but they kept trying to sort of play that expansive game. They stuck to their game plan, but unfortunately it just wasn't coming off. It continually broke down in that second half. And then of course you have Manny Lebok, who tries to get that ball out wide, as they been consistently trying to do, sort of to work it to edge, as Rassi's sort of game plan was, just sort of that expansive game. And he tries to get it wide, and Joseph Swally intercepts and scores, and he puts the Wallabies right back in the contest. Joseph Swally with his first international rugby try for the Wallabies, and that was absolutely huge, that because it really applied even more pressure that was already on the Springboks to sort of go and win that game, because all the onus was on them really as the home side, as the overwhelming favourites. But they just couldn't get that done, and I think that Swalehi try really got under their skin. From that point forward, I think the broken field runners from Tom Wright and Max Jorgensen and co was really huge. They were so clinical in that second half. Obviously Tom Wright scything through and then passing the ball to Harry Wilson, who goes underneath the post and puts the Wallabies in the lead. And then that quick Max Jorgensen try straight after, just striking whilst the Springboks were weak. And then suddenly from nowhere, the Wallabies are 11 points up with 10 minutes to go, and the Springboks are chasing the game, really, sort of with those two quick fire tries coming out of nowhere, really. And it was a case of just being ruthlessly clinical and sort of taking their opportunities, and just the threat that they had from broken field. Obviously, that last try from Tom Wright with an interception after the Springboks made a big break, and just going round, I think it was a loose defender, I think Ruan Norke, I believe it was, who's trying to keep up with Tom Wright. He just burns him on the outside, and then a beautiful step inside Damien Villamsa, and he goes and gets game over from that point forward with 5 minutes to go, and he makes it 38-22. And it was absolutely huge in that second half, with them taking their chances. They were so clinical, any opportunity they get, and they didn't get much territory. They really didn't. They had a bit of territory sort of at the start of that half, but it was just a case of sort of taking those points when any opportunity came up, and they were ruthlessly clinical. They were great at the breakdown. They disrupted the Springboks line out. They just always hung in there as well, and that was absolutely huge. In terms of the Springboks, what you'll sort of look at is the sort of looking towards this week, I think. It's very interesting to sort of see the amount of changes that Rassie Erasmus has made to the starting line, bringing back in Colby, bringing back in Andre Pollard, bringing up Damien Delende, a number of changes sort of in the pack as well, with Ibenetseveth and Peter Steph de Toy dropping out. It sort of feels like he made a statement with this squad. Well, yeah, I mean, he called the performance dog shit, basically, as blunt as he said after this. But it's interesting the amount of changes he's made and what sort of impact that'll have on this week. In terms of the strengths of the Springboks games, I think they were that sort of game plan of playing fast and hard in that opening 18 minutes was huge, and I think credit to them, they stuck to that game plan. Like, they didn't, well, it sort of depends on which side you're looking at it from, but they stuck to the game plan that they initially had, which was that sort of expansive style, fast phase play. They stuck through that through the whole game. So they stuck to their game plan, but you could also say on the flip side of that, well, you've got a test match to win here, you've got a rugby championship to win here, and there was certain points also where they could have taken the 3 points, which would have put them in a much more comfortable position moving forward. And I think just a case of the Springboks this week, when you speak about the strength of their sort of expansive game, but you're also saying to a certain point that may be a weakness, and maybe it's something that they readdress this week, where maybe at certain points they go for the points just to solidify their lead alongside playing that expansive style of play, and sort of finding that balance might be key in Cape Town this week to sort of overcome the Wallabies, because I think the Wallabies took their chances, whereas I think the Springboks in certain areas they maybe could have took 3 points just to sort of stave off the sort of threat of the Wallabies coming back into the game, because I think the Wallabies just grew and grew in confidence the more and more the Springboks, I guess, didn't score. And I think a couple of those 3-pointers, a couple of those opportunities could have been taken to sort of stave off that. So I think that's maybe something Rossi may look at this week, sort of just to taper that expansive running game and maybe go for the points more. That's sort of something that I would sort of look at if, I mean, he's a double World Cup winning champion coach, so it's not going to be listening to me, but that's sort of something from the outside it looks like it could potentially be a plan, especially when you look at Henry Pollard coming back in, who's, I guess, he's more of a game manager than Manny Lebok would be. Manny Lebok would be he would be the man you'd be picking if you want to play for that expansive running game. Not that Henry Pollard can't, of course, but I think Pollard coming back in is potentially a sign that they might try and go more controlled this week, and sort of go for those points and sort of play sort of, I guess, like a mix of what the Springboks way is and this new sort of expansive way that they've gone, which is sort of pressure at the scrum, pressure at the line out, sort of taking the points, building the scoreboard, but also bringing in that expansive game as well. So I think that the inclusion of Damien de Allende, or in particular Andre Pollard, could have a huge effect on that sort of thing. I think also Willie Leroux coming in at fullback is also another game manager for them, so I think we could definitely see them try to manage the game a wee bit more this week, alongside probably implementing that expansive running game that they have been doing this past week. In terms of the Wallabies, it's you do wonder with them. They were able to back up, obviously, beating the Lions in the third test with another great performance in Johannesburg last weekend. Particular strengths in their game was that kicking game. They really sort of took advantage of the spaces in the backfield, and they used their physicality and sort of the kick and chase as well. And they were ruthlessly clinical, brilliant in broken field and sort of recognising the spaces. But that scrum dominance, on the other hand of it, was really huge for the Wallabies. Sort of on the other side, the Springboks dominating that scrum, so it'll sort of be looking to hopefully, well, it's going to be hard to compete with them that way round. But I think the main thing for the Wallabies in this incoming week is, can they get to that emotional level again? I think with how much it would have taken from them in terms of getting to that sort of level of grit and determination to beat the Springboks, to come back from 22-0 down to win in Johannesburg, the first time they've done that in 62 years, and sort of the emotions around that. James O'Connor coming back in, with Nick White in there as well, coming, I guess, out of retirement very quickly. I think that's huge for them. See if they can have that same emotional edge this week, and I think that'll be the real challenge. Obviously, as I spoke, the scrum will be a weakness for them. I think the scrum is a weakness for any side going up against the Springboks. It's sort of a moment because the Springboks do it better than anyone else, really. But I think also that emotion, that what they'll more be looking at is that emotional edge, carry forward their performance from last week and the grit in defence. Can they continue to pick out those spaces in the backfield, those opportunities? Can they continue to make those opportunities count and pick out spaces in the Springboks line that are open? Can they do that? And can they have that emotional edge as well? So that'll be huge for them coming into this week for sure. In terms of predictions for this week, for the Springboks and the Wallabies, I can't really see the Wallabies doing it again. I think Springboks have had games in the past where they've lost one week. I mean, you remember back to Wales a couple of years ago, they lost the second test in Pretoria and then sort of went to Cape Town, and then they just broke Wales down. I can't see them losing 2 weeks in a row, especially after sort of the drop of the performance last week. The lack of accuracy that they had. I can't see Rassie Erasmus allowing that for a second week in a row, and I think the Springboks will have this one. Wallabies, I think, yeah, I think as much as Joe Schmidt is taking this Wallaby side forward, I'm not sure if they can complete like the mammoth upset that was at the weekend 2 weeks in a row. So I'm going to go for the Springboks by 15 points. I think it was similar to my prediction last week as well, and a couple of other boys' predictions as well. But I think that they'll not be able to back this up this week, in my opinion. But moving on to the game in Cordoba with New Zealand versus Argentina, that was also a huge one. New Zealand were just proved too strong for Argentina in this one. It was going to go one of two ways. It was either going to go, like all rugby games are going to go one of two ways. But I think it was either going to be New Zealand do what they do, take their opportunities on that at the start of the game, the sort of halftime stage, the physically dominates and they're really accurate set pieces, and they just take the game away from Argentina, or it was going to be Argentina who were going to create that upset, sort of get underneath the skin. I know Luke spoke about Argentina and how their physicality could have got them into the game and could have got them the win, ruffling the feathers of the 9 and 10 combo, getting up in their faces in that kicking game as well. And I think that was really interesting insight from Luke, and I think it's something that the Argentina really tried to do, but were unsuccessful. That I think it's very interesting when you compare the two games of the weekend. I think where Australia succeeded, Argentina failed. Australia succeeded in sort of that high kicking game, sort of winning the ball back, gaining territory through that, whereas Argentina just didn't get the same return out of that sort of kicking game with Albornoz and Garcia and Cruz Malia as well. They just didn't get the same out of that. I thought the New Zealand were just, in that first half in particular, they were just huge at the breakdown. They're putting huge pressure on Garcia, whereas I think on the other side of that, Argentina were unable to sort of check Cortez Racima, who's the 9 sort of coming in for Cam Roigard. And I think that was where the key battle was won in that first half, where they go up 31 points to 10. Despite having a lot of territory, that breakdown was just a killer for Argentina. And they were hugely physical at that breakdown, New Zealand, and they put huge pressure on Garcia, and he just wasn't able to get clean ball. There was a couple of sparks, obviously, with Isco scoring, but they just weren't really able to sustain that pressure. Argentina in that first half, or get the sort of the ball wide and get those opportunities. I think New Zealand just shut down that at most opportunities with their line speed and their physicality at the breakdown, and then just that ruthless edge when they get the ball into the hands and just getting out wide, finding the edge, finding Reece in the corner for 2 tries, and then going in 31-10. I think Argentina came out well in the second half. They were more physical, they were more intense, they played like a team that was chasing the game. And yeah, they brought it. They brought exactly what you want to see from Argentina, was that fast-paced, expansive game. Albornoz sort of playing as that dynamic playmaker who can sort of go himself as well, and he scores that try obviously from that scrum shortly into the second half, and you're thinking, right, if they can get another one quickly here, well, you can see what happened. Another one did eventually come in that 65th minute with Oviedo, who I think was very good, the number 8 for Argentina, who made the game 31-24. That also was a huge moment in the game, or what could have been a huge moment in the game, with Oviedo scoring, because obviously you had the yellow card for the All Blacks there. 15 minutes to go there. You're looking at the All Blacks, 14 men down, a couple of tries from Argentina in that second half. They haven't really had the same success at the breakdown. They haven't had the same success in shutting down the Argentina with their line speed, and you're sort of thinking Argentina have turned the tide here. They're a man up. There's 15 minutes to go. They've got one try, a converted try, to level the game. Could this happen? And it was a very real possibility, but I think just the control that New Zealand showed after that try from Oviedo was huge. They just went in tight. They just got the ball. They just milked the penalty. They got down into the corner, and then it was just the line-out game after that. It was just the line-out game. I think a couple of New Zealand commentators spoke about it. It was like New Zealand targeted Argentina in that line-out in the last 15 minutes, and they targeted them not being able to defend New Zealand's rolling maul game, and Tokiaku scores, and that just kills the game. It kills the game for Argentina. So it was just that real control, and then of course they score another line-out try with Tokiaku as well. It's the scoreline looks a lot tighter than what you thought it was going to be with 15 minutes to go, and it was just a real impressive New Zealand performance. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't. It was the stage from about half time, and sort of, I guess, that third quarter of the game you're speaking about. Sort of third quarter in the bit of the game, and sort of half time up until the 65th minute, where you're looking at the Argentina coming back into it. But I think when the tide really turned against the All Blacks, when the lead was cut to 7 points with a man down, they just dug in and they showed some real international test grit, and that is the sign of a top level side. For when the momentum is going against you, you just dig in, you play tight, you recognise, you have patience, you milk that penalty, and then you sort of execute the little chinks in the armour of the opposition team, which in Argentina's case in this game was the lack of success at defending that New Zealand maul, and I think they did that perfectly in the last 15 minutes, and it won them the game. It closed out the game, and I think they'll be really, really proud of their efforts, because to go and win in Argentina is not easy, and to get off to a winning start is absolutely huge. In terms of moving into this weekend, Argentina will take some great heart from the fact that they sort of came back in that second half. They scored those 2 tries. They were dangerous. They were able to penetrate the New Zealand defence. Nos was particularly impressive. I think it'll be interesting to see how he sort of carries forward his game into this week. Of course, it was his first game back in after missing the England series. I think he was absolutely fantastic. It'll be interesting to see how they adjust, really. I think there'll be some points there where they'll be a wee bit concerned about that line out, particularly in the second half. They'll be a wee bit concerned about defending Garcia at the 9 at the breakdown, but I think they'll have gained an awful lot of knowledge about the All Blacks and sort of their major threats there, and they'll perhaps come with that different game plan. Felipe Contepone will come with hopefully that game plan to negate those problems that they had, and sort of find a different way, and sort of take a lot of hope coming into the second game against the All Blacks, and hopefully have an improved performance next week, because they have beaten the All Blacks before. They know how to do it. I think it'll be really interesting to see how they take the learnings from this week into next week. In terms of the All Blacks, I think they'll be really, really proud of their efforts, and they should be really proud of their efforts, especially after digging in the last 15 minutes to close out the game. I think it'll just be much of the same this week. They'll want to have that first half performance with intense pressure at the breakdown, creating messy ball, and line speed, shutting down Argentina's phase play. They'll want to sustain that for a longer period in this game and build upon that first half performance to make it a 60 to 80 minute performance with those same characteristics. They'll want to be as accurate as they were for basically the whole game on sort of their set piece plays, and I thought they were really accurate with Jordy, and their kicking game is very good as well through Jordy Barrett and Bowden Barrett. Will Jordan and Sebi Reese and Rico Ioane were all threats as well. I think they'll probably want to get them more into the game. I think Rico Ioane was maybe a wee bit quiet. He could maybe come back into this game and be more of a force, but I thought the other two were very good as well. But yeah, they'll want to sustain their first half performance for a longer period this week, and they'll want to ultimately get a win, and they'll want to come out with 2 away wins to start the Rugby Championship, which I think after what's happened to the Springboks last week puts them in a really great place to potentially win the Rugby Championship. So yeah, that was the Rugby Championship Roundup. We're very much looking forward to this weekend and seeing what it has in store, whether the Springboks can come back and just puts the Wallabies to the sword, or whether the Wallabies can spring in another upset of what you would say probably a third in a row, and it'll be really interesting to see the development of that Wallaby side this week as well, because it's a huge test for them as well. And Argentina and New Zealand, what's going to happen there? Can Argentina take the learnings from this week? Can they come back in there? I think, and for that game in particular, I think the All Blacks will have them again. I think maybe 10-point victory this time will be slightly closer, but I think they'll have them. But it'll be interesting to see both games this weekend and how that progresses. And then yeah, that'll be a third of the games gone. And wow, what starts the Rugby Championship that was this weekend. I think we thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you very much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed me going solo today. Dom and Luke obviously not able to join, but we'll also have another podcast episode for you this week as well, with Thomas Oakley, Welsh and Scarlets fan, where we go through the new proposals from the Welsh Rugby Union to cut their professional sides down to 2, which is obviously absolutely shock news, really. And it's as a podcast which is based, well, first initially in Cardiff, and still in Cardiff, I suppose, as 2 students from Cardiff, myself and Luke and Dom formerly. It's huge news for us, so that'll be coming up in the podcast episode next. But thank you very much for watching. Look forward to next week's episode to recap round 2, and thank you very much for watching. Like and subscribe and follow.